This video will cover how to assemble a 3Pi Plus robot kit. Diagrams and step-by-step instructions to assemble the 3Pi Plus can also be found in its user's guide on the Pololu website, and we recommend you consult those instructions while you assemble your robot. Here's a list of the tools you will need to assemble your 3Pi Plus. Begin by identifying the components included with your 3Pi Plus kit. You should have one 3Pi Plus bumper skirt, one 3Pi Plus chassis, two 3Pi Plus battery covers. These parts are assembled for shipping and you'll take them apart to install the motors and electronics. One 3Pi Plus control board, two micrometal gear motors with extended motor shafts, one LCD, one 2x7 low-profile male header, one buzzer, two magnetic encoder discs, two 32mm Pololu wheel hubs, two tires for the wheels, two 3Pi Plus motor clips, jumper wires, one 1/2 inch plastic ball, two AAA double battery contacts, four AAA single battery contacts, four 256 screws and nuts, and if you purchase the Hyper Edition, you should also have one spare gearbox. Before beginning assembly, plug the 3Pi Plus 32U4 control board into USB and verify that it works by observing the behavior of its LEDs. You should see the yellow, green, and red user LEDs light briefly and turn off, and then the green user LED should start blinking slowly. Disconnect the control board after you confirm it's working. Next, disassemble the plastic chassis parts. On the bottom side of the chassis, locate the clips on each side of the battery compartment. Use your index fingers to gently pry these open while pushing the battery compartment with your thumbs. Then remove the battery compartment covers. Now you can start assembling your robot. Insert the two double battery contacts into the bottom of the chassis, making sure to put them on the correct side. Insert the four single battery contacts into the top of the chassis, adjusting them until they are centered, straight, and match the height of the double battery contacts. Install the tires on the wheels. Press the output shaft of each motor into a wheel, with the flat side of the wheel hub facing the motor. The end of the gearbox shaft should end up flush with the outside of the wheel. A good way to do this is to set the wheel on a flat surface, like a tabletop, and press the motor shaft into the wheel until it contacts the surface. I'm doing this on top of this quartz tile, so I have a hard surface to push against instead of the silicone soldering mat I'm working on. Cut a couple of jumper wires out from the adhesive they're packaged in and then cut those in half. These segments will be used as the motor leads. Using pliers, make a slight bend at the tip of each wire to hook in the motor lead tab to hold it in place for soldering. If your bends end up being too big, you can trim them with some flush cutters. Each motor's positive terminal is indicated by a plus sign in the black plastic end of the motor. For consistency, we recommend soldering the motors to the control board with the positive terminal closest to the front, so you should attach the leads to allow the motors to be oriented this way. Now comes the tricky part, actually soldering the leads onto the motors. When doing this, you want to be careful not to hold the soldering iron against the motor lead for more than a few seconds, or the heat can start to damage the motor brushes. So try to be reasonably quick and efficient with this soldering. If the first attempt does not go well, remove the soldering iron and let the motor cool for a few seconds before trying again. If it's too hard to get everything soldered and aligned in one step, you can always do it in two. On this lead, I got the solder on, but the lead was totally crooked. But now I didn't have to deal with applying solder, so I just waited a few moments, then applied the soldering iron again so I could adjust the lead position. Now you can install the magnetic encoder discs onto the motor shafts. The end of the shaft should be flush with the disc, and you can accomplish this similarly to how you put the wheel on. Place the motors onto the channel in the middle of the chassis, aligning each gearbox with the grooves in the channel. The outer plate of the gearbox should be even with the edge of the chassis. Next, solder the buzzer to the 3Pi Plus 32U4 control board. A way to do this and get it sitting flush on the board is to first solder just one pin. Then pick up the board and use a finger to push down on the buzzer while you remelt the solder on that pin. The buzzer should then be sitting flat on the board, and then you can solder the second pin. If you have any optional electronics or headers you want to install, now is a good time to do that. Next, place the control board on the chassis. The motor leads and single battery contacts should be inserted into the corresponding through holes. Screw the control board to the chassis. We recommend using 4 screws in the outermost holes in each row. In each of the 4 mounting holes, insert a 256 machine screw through the main board and chassis and tighten it against a nut under the chassis. It is usually easier to place the nut into the recess first and hold it there with a finger or a piece of tape while inserting the screw. Double check that the motors are still sitting properly in the chassis, with the outer plate of the gearbox even with the edge of the chassis. If they aren't in there properly, the bumper skirt won't install. Now you can solder the motor leads to the main board and trim off the excess length of each motor lead. Double check the alignment of the battery contacts. Then solder the single battery contacts to the main board, making sure the solder wets all the way around the contact and not just on one side. If you want to use the bump sensors on the 3Pi Plus, cut the supports for the flaps on the front of the bumper skirt. Install the bumper skirt by pushing the clips on each side over the motor housings until they snap into place. Solder the 2x7 low-profile header to the LCD. The shorter side of the header should be inserted fully through the corresponding through holes from the bottom side of the LCD until the header is flush, and the solder joints should be made on the top side of the LCD. Solder a single pin first and ensure the header is flush before making any additional solder joints. If the header is not flush, you can use the soldering iron to remelt the solder joint while you make the necessary adjustments. Be careful not to touch the pin you are soldering, as the heat will conduct all the way through to the other end. Plug in the LCD, making sure all the pins are in the header and that it's in the correct orientation. Incorrect positioning can damage the LCD or the main board. Next, press the ball caster into its socket on the bottom of the chassis. Install 4 new or freshly charged AAA batteries in the battery compartment. We recommend using rechargeable AAA nickel metal hydride cells. The correct orientation for the batteries is indicated by the silkscreen markings printed on the bottom of the control board. Now you can put on the battery compartment covers and your 3Pi Plus 32U4 robot is complete and ready to be used. Power it up and play with the preloaded demo program so you can familiarize yourself with what it can do before programming it yourself. We hope you enjoy your 3Pi Plus robot. Visit the 3Pi Plus product page for more information about the 3Pi Plus and select the Resources tab to find its user's guide, Arduino libraries, and other downloads. We'd love to see what you do with your 3Pi Plus. Post to the Share Your Project section of our forum or tag us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter.